Hi, and welcome to Gaming Like It's 1979. I have a few game obsessions that I return to time and time again. If you've watched this channel, you know that probably the biggest one is programming games. But there's another genre that maintains a permanent residence inside my head, and that's turn-based strategy games. Ever since the days of the Apple II and the old strategic simulation game Computer Ambush, I've always had a soft spot for them. Games like this can operate on several different levels. If they operate on the level of moving entire armies, we'd call that strategic. If you're moving individual units, that's a tactical game. And if it's somewhere in between, we'd typically call that operational. For largely historical reasons, these games tended to come in at a somewhat higher level of UI complexity than action games. But over time, game creators realized that it was possible to make a tactical, turn-based RPG where the tactics were complex, but the UI itself was simple. Some of them even made their way to handheld devices like the Game Boy. Games like Advance Wars, Final Fantasy Tactics, and Fire Emblem. What Fire Emblem brought to the genre was a level of drama that hadn't really been seen before, at least at this level of depth. Instead of having interchangeable soldiers, tanks, or airplanes, your units were characters with individual quirks, motivations, and unique abilities. And unlike most games at the time, Fire Emblem brought the concept of death being permanent. It sounds funny, but in the context of strategy games of the time, the idea that a unit wasn't just valuable, but literally irreplaceable, was unusual. And since the plot and characterization of games meant that you were invested in the characters, a member of your army dying wasn't just a loss, it was a tragedy. Today I'm taking a look at Telepath Tactics Liberated, a new indie game from Sinister Designs, releasing March 14th. Sinister Designs graciously provided a build of the game in order for me to be able to review it in time for release, for which I thank them. Telepath Tactics Liberated is actually a remake of an earlier game called simply Telepath Tactics. That game originated from a Kickstarter campaign all the way back in 2013. The game was released in 2015, and I played it at the time. It was a very strange game, a mixture of brilliant ideas and clunky implementation. Built using the Adobe Air runtime, it felt like a game that was reaching for greatness, but was being held back by a lack of polish. Telepath Tactics Liberated uses a brand new engine designed for Sinister Designs' upcoming game Together in Battle, and the improvements make a heck of a difference. Apart from the mechanical changes, the art has been completely revamped for the new release. So Telepath Tactics Liberated brings a lot of polish to this game, and what you end up with is something that has the charm of Fire Emblem, but with additional mechanics that make positioning and cover much more important. Liberated is a game that feels greater than the sum of its parts. The game begins by introducing you to Emma and Sabrina Strider, two sisters who escaped from slavery at a young age. Taken in by the lizard-like Licit people, they're raised as warriors. They've set off to fight the slavers and rescue their father. As you progress through the plot, you start to meet others who will join your band. These people all have their own goals and motivations, and if you can keep them alive, you'll find out more about their stories as the game progresses. The game has a nice variety of team members from varied backgrounds, which is nice to see. I mentioned permadeath as being something that made the early Fire Emblem games stand out. Telepath Tactics Liberated wrestles with the reality that permadeath is a great idea, but in practice it can be more annoying than enjoyable. In my experience, instead of accepting a permadeath, many people will view a character death as a game over state and just replay a level if anyone dies. So while the idea is fraught in theory, in practice it can just be a time waster. Telepath Tactics Liberated offers 5 difficulty levels, which have different effects on the game, ranging from no permadeath to characters can die, and by the way, everything else is harder too. The middle difficulty level, labeled Soldier, takes an interesting middle position. If a character is killed in battle, they withdraw from that map. They can return on future maps, but they've permanently lost a point of health. This feels like a really great compromise. In my game, I've already had 2 or 3 deaths, and I've simply accepted them as the cost of doing battle, which is what you'd want to see. As near as I can tell, there's no way to change your game's difficulty once it's begun, or at least if there is, I didn't find it. The map design in the game really stands out. Positioning in Telepath Tactics Liberated is key for success, and there are a lot of tools for you or your enemies to outmaneuver each other. Most maps have a wide variety of choke points caused by natural obstacles, such as trees. Many of these choke points can themselves be destroyed, so you or your enemies can make an unexpected entrance to allow flanking your opponent. Speaking of flanking, that matters a lot in Telepath Tactics Liberated. Backstabs and sidestabs give a bonus to damage, and some classes can counterattack. You start most battles badly outnumbered. So success in Telepath Tactics Liberated is often about creating a local advantage to take out vulnerable enemies to try to even the odds before you're overwhelmed. Likewise, sequencing your attacks to minimize the possibility of counterattacks is key to success. Another mechanic that the game makes heavy use of is repositioning. Both shoving units forward and pulling them back is possible, and this can be done to both friends and foes. In one map, you'll find yourself pushing an ally forward so they can get in range for an attack, or pulling one of your healers to safety. In another map, maybe you'll see an enemy standing next to a deep lake, push them in, and get the satisfaction of watching them drown. Movement rates seem fairly low, so on many maps, I found myself trying to set up chains of pushes to allow myself to end levels sooner rather than later. This urge to finish levels early that I had is, I think, a testament to both the level design and the plot. From a strictly min-max perspective, probably the right thing to do is to defer ending a level for as long as possible to maximize the amount of experience your units get. But the game got into my head so successfully that for some of these levels, fleeing to safety felt like it was important, even though it probably wasn't optimal play to do so. It's a good sign when a game can get into your head this way. In addition to the base campaign, Telepath Tactics Liberated includes support for additional campaigns. In fact, the game includes a full-fledged campaign editor. So if you ever wanted to learn that scripting turn-based games is harder than you thought, this is your big chance. The game it's a sequel to put a lot of focus on hot seat multiplayer. But Telepath Tactics Liberated is really squarely focused on making a great single-player experience. Maybe I'm biased, but I think this is a good call. I do have a few minor nits to pick with the game, but they're really no great shakes. For one, the game is designed to shunt you from battle to battle and only rarely stops for breath. This, combined with the way the save system works being slightly unintuitive, well, while playing, I was never really clear whether the game was auto-saving or whether I had to manually save each turn if I wanted to preserve progress. Even leading up to the release, though, Sinister Design has been tweaking the save system, so I think this will improve as they get feedback from players. On the whole, Telepath Tactics Liberated is a refined turn-based tactical RPG. It's a love letter to the genre, and anyone who enjoys strategy games should pick it up. This has been Gaming Like It's 1979. Thanks for watching.